was the early 1980s and the Japanese computer market was flooded with choices. Many of those choices, though incompatible with each other, were based on similar hardware, especially the CPU, which tended to be either a Motorola chip or one of the various licensed Zilog Z80 clones. Nazuhiko Nishi was a vice president at Microsoft, but also a director of the ASCII Corporation. Inspired by the way VHS had unified video standards, he wondered if the same could be done for the home computer market. He approached his superiors at Microsoft and explained his idea. Microsoft and the ASCII Corporation realised that a standardised platform for the home would mean greater overall software revenues. They approached various computer manufacturers and worked out a spec based on the capabilities of existing machines, including the SpectraVideo SV328, where a lot of the details came from. They quickly agreed on the Z80 being the CPU, based on the fact that it was cheaper and easier to design a computer around it, and the fact that many of its partners already had a Z80 based computer on the market. Eventually they agreed on a standard series of specifications. To be MSX accredited, your computer had to meet the basic requirements. This meant that software written for one manufacturer's machines would run on all machines. These initial specs were released in 1983 and were already on the modest side compared to the rest of the market, especially in the US and Europe. But this was the low barrier of entry. As long as they didn't break compatibility, manufacturers could make machines with more memory or more features if they wanted to. Also, the spec allowed for memory upgrades using a cartridge-based system as well. Thus, the MSX standard was born, and it would turn into a massive success. Not only did it allow existing manufacturers to produce machines to a spec that would allow even more software to be available for their users, it also allowed other manufacturers, ones that hadn't gotten into the computer market, to break in, such as Panasonic, Canon, Casio and Yamaha. The MSX was based mostly on off-the-shelf components, and even the non-generic bits were eventually incorporated into a single chip dubbed the MSX engine to make designing compatible computers even cheaper and easier. For the home consumer, this meant they still had a lot of choice, different manufacturers, even different amounts of built-in memory, different keyboard types and various other abilities, but they knew that the large body of software would most likely work with that machine. Unlike the old days when they had to buy Fujitsu compatible software or NEC compatible software, they could just buy MSX software. Probably. The initial spec allowed for machines with as little as 16 kilobytes of memory, and as I mentioned earlier, this was a fairly modest amount of memory for the time. So manufacturers quickly released higher end machines with more memory, and because these manufacturers were quite large names like Sony, software companies tended to target 48K or 64K instead of these lower amounts. For the most part, this was solvable with either internal upgrades or, as we said, the cartridges, but there would always be two classes of machine, this lower tier and this higher tier. Although it was still far better than the Wild West that existed before. Over its time, MSX machines were made by over 20 different manufacturers, resulting in countless different computers. Although initially designed as a Japanese initiative, the success did mean an attempt was made to sell internationally. North America was largely ignored due to the popularity of homegrown machines like the Commodore 64, but there was some success in South America. Equally, whilst there was an attempt to enter the UK market, machines like this, the Toshiba HX10, quite a popular machine because it was quite low priced, the relative strength of the Spectrum, Commodore and Amstrad brands meant that it was fighting an uphill battle. The MSX did find success in other European countries though, with both the Netherlands and Spain being especially strong markets. Unfortunately, because it was fairly close to the Spectrum computer and, as we said, was fighting an uphill battle against it, most of the software that tended to be released, especially in the UK, were very cheap and nasty ports from the Spectrum. And because of that, many Western owners didn't really see how versatile the MSX standard was, what it could actually do. Amstrad obviously had a similar thing where they also got, at least initially, very bad ports from the Spectrum when it could do far more. But I'd say the MSX had it even worse. Half the time joysticks didn't work on the MSX, even though the vast majority of the machines come with built-in joystick ports. There were several upgrades to the MSX spec throughout its lifetime, culminating in the release of TurboR in 1990. This no longer used the Z80 chip and instead used a custom ASCII branded 16-bit processor called the R800. By this time though, the MSX was basically over. It had prospered though for nearly 7 years. Now this video is really only covering the original MSX spec, which all these machines use. There's still the MSX2, MSX2 Plus and the aforementioned TurboR spec. They'll get their own videos eventually, mostly when I get actual hardware to do. I don't have any of them yet. They get more pricey as they go up, as they get slightly rarer. But we will eventually get the hardware to cover them and we will do videos on separate ones. We've got to the end of the video and I haven't mentioned the acronym and what it means. So, the MSX acronym. The reason we haven't mentioned it up to now is because there's really no definitive answer to what it actually stands for. Its own creator has changed his mind on at least 2 separate occasions. It's either Microsoft Extended, referencing the built-in BASIC, or it's Matsushita Sony, referencing the first really 2 truly big manufacturers to sign on. It could be machines with software exchangeability, which is one of the first names that Nishi said it might stand for. But then he kind of that one though I do say it sounds a little bit like the kind of acronym you make up what it means afterwards. You come up with MSX and then you make up what it means. So that one it's not up there with my possible options in my head. And the father of the MSX, Nishi, he says he might have named it after the MX missile, which was really in the news at the time. But again, that's the second time he's changed his mind about what it means, so who knows. As I said, there's no definitive answer, but when you consider the fact that Microsoft were heavily involved in this whole thing, and in the 80s they were, let's say, arrogant. I would fully have expected their name to be in there somewhere. So I think probably the Microsoft Extended is possibly the most likely, just literally because it's got Microsoft in the actual title. The MSX was pretty much unchallenged in the Japanese market up until the point when the home console started to rise, such as Nintendo's Famicom. A lot of the bigger games publishers, such as Konami, had kind of started on the MSXs and then shifted across. Like franchises like Metal Gear, for instance, were largely popular on the MSX before they came anywhere near any of the other platforms. Because of this, its legacy in Japan is absolutely known. It's such a huge bedrock in those countries. Like the Spectrum for us, the MSX standard is a huge deal in Japan, which makes it all more of a shame that in the rest of the world it's pretty much just a footnote. Even in the European countries where it did so well, it's still not kind of part of the legacy as such, apart maybe from the Netherlands where it was vastly more popular. But it's a shame that it's such an amazing range of computers just didn't make it here. You go on the Japanese auctions and there are just huge varieties of machines. In fact, of course, we've got 3 of them right here. And we will be talking about these right now. So so these are all MSX machines. These will all run effectively the same software, more or less. This here cartridge in this machine, it's quite stiff. That's a Mega Mapper cartridge, so that gives not only the ability to load games from an SD card, but also 512k of memory. We can just get that back in. There we go. And that same cartridge will work on this Japanese machine here, this rather lovely Hitachi HP50. It will work on this Japanese Sony HP10. It will also work on this very much UK plugged up Toshiba HX10. And that's the point. These are very different machines. They're different in style, certainly. They're different in the amounts of memory. This machine here just has 16k of memory, whereas these two both have 64. And just in also their abilities, like this has got a huge expansion bus on the back where you can add printers and stuff in. This one's very mangled. This is a very broken up machine, unfortunately. This machine here has got its own specialised joystick ports and things, and this machine here is this is an enigma. This machine I suspect is probably, yeah, I would say is probably one of my favourite machines I own now. It's just wonderful. You see it looks kind of blocky here, but that's because this keyboard is actually separate. So if you have games that only use joysticks, then you can take the keyboard off and unplug it entirely. It's got a little plug in the front you can just pull out. So you can just use this effectively as a console. And you can have the keyboard separately, or it's got these two little holes here which line up with the feet on the keyboard. And so it will just kind of lock in place there. It's a wonderful machine. And that's a completely, again, different style of doing things. This is kind of odd, but I love it. I mean, it's amazing. This here is a graphic equalizer. So as you're playing the games, the sound is kind of referenced with LEDs going up and down the screen. Wonderful. You'll also see that quite a lot of these machines had two. Oh, well, I'll get that close in a minute. A couple of these machines had two cartridge slots. You may just see that. That's the second cartridge slot here. It's got two. This one's only got one. That is because you can have memory expansions and also game cartridges, and so you've got two ports, so you can have both. There are also extenders available, so you can add even more cartridges. This one, I believe you could have memory upgrades in this expansion bus at the back. I'm not going to show it because the machine is in a state. It doesn't work. I need to fix this machine. It's in a very poor state indeed. And so it's only got one cartridge slot because you just use games in there. But yeah, they're such incredibly versatile machines, and just genuinely a shame we didn't get the huge variety of machines that Japan got, because like I said, just one day just go onto Yahoo auctions and look for the MSX machines and you'll just see a just embarrassment of options. And some of them are just some of the most gorgeous machines ever. I mean, look at this. This is beautiful. This red thing. It's got, I haven't got them out, but it's got little matching puck joysticks, which look like they're going to be really hard to use, by the way. I haven't tried to use them, but they're quite small. And yeah, and this one, obviously, with all its keyboard and everything like that, it's just astonishing machines. This one's slightly more on the duller side. It's coming to the UK after all, but even so, it still looks kind of nice. Like coloured buttons. We like that. Amstrad taught us to love these different coloured buttons, and this has definitely got them. So yeah, it's a genuine shame that we didn't get those options and this machine didn't take off over here, because I think it would have been a hugely successful machine, which you'll see in a minute when I show you some actual Japanese games and how good they were compared to, and when you compare them to like the Spectrum alternative and the version that came out in the UK, which invariably was a poor port of the Spectrum version. I might do comparisons. I don't know. I think it's. I'm not trying to compete machines in each other. I'm just showing you how good a machine could be. We're absolutely going to play on this machine because I love this machine to bits. I did a stream recently using it. I just love it. It's a great machine. This is a great cartridge, by the way. Although a pain to set up, it does a lot of stuff and it's very, very good. Anyway, let's go and play some games. As a recap, the MSX was a computing standard introduced in Japan by the ASCII Corporation and Microsoft. It set the minimum requirements of a 3.58 MHz Z80 CPU, 8K of RAM, an AY3 8910 sound chip, and a TMS 9918 video display processor. As long as the machines were at least compatible with this specification, the companies could expand their computers. In reality, the minimum amount of memory ended up being 16K, and usually nearer 32. Adhering to this specification and using a compatible MSX BIOS with MSX Basic, a version of Microsoft Basic, meant that several manufacturers could make computers that would use the same software, a model used by the 3DO company later on. The MSX2 increased the specifications slightly. 64K became the minimum, and 128K pretty much became the standard, especially in Europe. Yamaha took over the reins from Texas Instruments to produce the video display processor. They introduced the V9938. This increased the video RAM from 16K to at least 64, although with several using 128. A new 80x24 text mode was added, and bitmap video modes, which fixed the attribute clash problems that the MSX1 sometimes suffered from. Two new resolutions were added, a 512x212 16 colour mode and a 256x212 256 colour mode. The sprites were improved. It still had 32 sprites, but now they could have 16 colours instead of 1, and they could handle 8 sprites per line, double that of the predecessor. Several hardware acceleration features were added, including drawing and blitzing routines, plus enhanced scrolling support. These features were added while still maintaining compatibility with MSX1 Games. Sound was slightly improved with the Yamaha YM2149 replacing the General Instruments AY3 8910. These additions kept the MSX2 machines competitive when they were first released in 1985. With 128K becoming pretty much standard in Europe, the specs lined up nicely with machines being released by Sinclair, Amstrad and Commodore. Unfortunately, whilst this spec bump was popular in Japan, it still didn't help to increase the MSX's market share across Europe, and it had very little impact outside of the areas it was already popular. Right, well, let's take a look at the machine we have here. Okay, so what we have here is a Sanyo Wavy 23, and this is obviously an MSX2 computer. It's got 64K of memory and 128K of VRAM. It isn't normally quite this colour. This one has a little bit of discoloration over time. Yeah, it's a fairly nice keyboard. It's got a nice bit of travel on. They're quite stiff. That works quite well. Slightly sticky. I've literally only got this one a little while ago. If you see the unboxing when this arrived, it wasn't that long ago. I do need to do a lot of work on it other than get it working, which I have done. So 2 cartridge slots. This reset button, which is barely moves. I think that's probably normal though. There's 2 lights here to show the caps lock and one of the other locks. If we have a look at the rest of the machine. There we go. On the back here, we can see we have the printer port here. No helpful top level text on this one, so I will have to look. RGB. We have our composite sound and video there. A channel select for the RF switch here, and the built-in power lead, which was very much almost destroyed when I got it, but we got it working, so that was fine. On the side we have a fairly chunky power switch, and on this side we have there we go, it's not heavy, but it's quite long, so it makes it harder to move around. Yeah, so on this side we have the 2 joystick ports and a cassette port over here. So yeah, nothing on the front obviously. It's a little bit rattling around in there, but I'm sure that's nothing serious, hopefully. Yeah, it's an interesting shaped machine. It's a weird shape here, which I don't know, you can't say that it's like a wrist rest, because that would just be for the arrow keys, I guess. Maybe it's a bit weird though. I guess you could call it a wavy shape, so that's fair enough. I like it anyway. It's an interesting shape. Plus, it was relatively cheap because I bought it, of course, as not working, because it wasn't when I got it. But there wasn't very much wrong with it in the end. Yes, this is probably one of the, I wouldn't say least desirable, but certainly not up there with like the Sony's MSX2 machines and things like that. But it's a lovely little machine, and it does work, so that's the important thing. I recently made an RGB cable for it. They're not too difficult, just fiddly, like all RGB cables always are. But yeah, it is an interesting little machine. And when you see some of the MSX2 specific games, like especially certain famous ones like the Metal Gear series, which really started on these machines, although historically didn't start, but certainly series started on these machines. You really can see that these machines had quite a lot of power to push around. Anyway, that's all summary stuff, so we'll get to that in a minute, but let's move on to some games. Right, well, the MSX deserved to do better than it did. Several incredibly polished and impressive computers were released based on the spec, and the MSX2 pushed that even further. When you look at the changes at a high level, it doesn't look like there were a large amount done. It doesn't look like there was a mass change, but the changes that were made were impactful. They were important changes, and they really did push the MSX standard to the top of that 80s tech tree. But that only really matters when you get the sales. And just unfortunately, MSX never really got the market outside of Japan, apart from a few pockets here and there. And that really held it back. And it is a shame. They are nice machines. Right, so should you buy one? Obviously, there's still 2 parts to this story that we haven't covered yet. And they are going to be ones that, well, we'll cover hopefully at some point. But it will take a while, because that's the MSX2 Plus, which is, again, small additions to the range. They're quite hard to get hold of and quite expensive. And then there's the R turbo machines, and yeah, those are really expensive and hard to get hold of. So eventually I hope to get them, because I want them anyway, but I'll hope to get them so we can finish off this story, because it's a story that deserves to be told. So yes, you know what? You absolutely should get an MSX machine. If you can get an MSX2 machine, then all the better, because you have access to more games, and with backwards compatibility with the previous library, which if you include Japanese games, it's a really big library with some really impressive titles. Now, the MSX2 obviously does carry a premium, especially European models. European models are quite expensive, though they do exist. But again, yeah, you've got a wider market if you do manage to get an MSX2. But if you only manage to get an MSX1, then there's lots of those. You can find those for fairly reasonable prices, especially if you don't mind shopping in Japan. Then your market is much wider, and you can still play quite a lot of the games anyway. So yeah, it's even if you can only get an MSX1, it's still worth doing. Right. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like. If you really enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy the video or you have something else to say, then please leave it in the comments below. And hit the bell icon thing to get told of videos when they come out. See you next time. Now, there are just two mainstream generations of the MSX left. We're only really going to concentrate on the TurboR. The reason being the MSX2 Plus, the other missing generation, is really just a kind of another bump on the MSX2. Plus, I don't own one. I do like covering machines that I actually own. Maybe we'll do, we'll certainly do, if I manage to finally get one at some point, we'll certainly do a video on that machine, so we'll probably cover a lot of the bits in there anyway. But we do talk about it a little bit. So, after the release of the MSX2 specification, the ASCII Corporation, on its own now because Microsoft had kind of bowed out of it at this point, and its partners started to plan for the MSX3. This was a smaller group of partners. Again, Microsoft had gone. Because after the relatively lukewarm reception of the MSX2, certainly compared to how popular the MSX1 was, and a few other factors, then we'd seen kind of a bit of a narrowing of that group of people that were making machines and having input on the specification. But the plan for the MSX3 would see the specification finally move away from its roots, the Z80 processor, slightly getting a little bit old in the tooth at this point. Still amazing though, obviously. And it would use a much more advanced VDP designed by Yamaha. Yamaha, of course, being a fairly key partner in the whole of the MSX experience. But these plans would take a far longer time than the group would have liked, and so they decided to release a bit of a half step in the shape of the MSX2 in 1988, 3 years after the release of the MSX2 specification. The specification built on the MSX2 by improving mostly video capabilities. It kind of really ratified the RGB port, which had been present for a lot of the machines anyway. The improved VDP, whilst not a massive advancement like the one that was planned for the MSX3, did add some really nice features such as hardware scrolling. Only 3 manufacturers in the end would create mainline systems, and they would be officially released only in Japan, ASCII having kind of walked away from the European market quite a bit at this point. Sanyo and Panasonic would create 3 different machines each, and Sony would end up creating another 2. The uptake wasn't good, and there was very little software specifically designed for the MSX2 Plus specification, although there were some MSX2 games that if they detected the updated machine, they would take advantage of some of those features. Again, mostly that hardware scrolling, which was only several 8-bit machines have proved how powerful that was, especially for games. But this MSX2 Plus release had shown that the time was basically limited for the platform. People were moving on to IBM PC-based systems and other machines, and this kind of 8-bit holdover was really not pulling in the money like it used to. And so, because of this, with Yamaha's VDP still quite a way off for release, the group decided they couldn't wait for it, and they would release the final specification of the MSX before that was available. But without all of the new features that the group had planned, they didn't feel they could call this the MSX3, kind of suggesting they were planning to release an MSX3 at some point. So instead, this one was named the TurboR. The TurboR, even without all of the features planned for the MSX3 platform, was still a massive change to that original specification, easily the largest change since the beginning. The main processor was now an R800, which was a RISC-based processor, which is where the R comes from in the TurboR name. There was still a Z80 in there. The MSX engine, if you will, had a Z80, and it could be switched on kind of at will by the machine, so you could use it for backwards compatibility for software that would not work too well on this R800 processor. The TurboR was still a fantastically powerful computer, even in this kind of restricted version. It boasted a 16-bit processor in RISC-based CPU. It also boasted improved sound, and it could address far more memory, inherently address far more memory. And it was much easier to upgrade as well, which we'll be showing actually the machine we've got. We will be updating that in a future video, and you see how easy it is to upgrade it. But the market was pretty much long gone by the time the TurboR was released in 1991, and only Panasonic ended up releasing home computers based on the specification. There were also some computers designed for industry by Takaoka, I think it is. Apologies if I got that bad. Very little software was designed for the TurboR, but software capable of running in that RISC mode would benefit from increased performance. Advancements that the TurboR brought. There are also some things that were taken away. I think possibly the saddest of these is the cassette interface. So whilst apparently you could add a cassette interface because of some timing issues, it required a lot more hardware to get it working properly, so it just didn't have it anymore, which is a real shame. It's a giant bit of legacy that's taken away. But I mean, the TurboR machines also inherently had floppy drive interfaces in them, so I guess, yeah, cassette was long dead as well, so it's understandable why they wouldn't bother to put that many resources into trying to get tapes working. Finally, at the end of this, Panasonic, the last great holdout to the MSX standard, decided to call it a day. They just felt that there was nowhere really to go with the MSX, and whilst people were playing games, they were playing them on home consoles now, and it wanted a bit of that market, so it decided to concentrate on what it felt was going to be a much more successful line of systems, and it would push those resources into its 3DO system. Well, that Yamaha VDP, by the way, did turn up eventually. It had all of the MSX backwards compatibility stuff removed for. I know it'd be interesting for it to have been in there, but anyway, for fairly obvious reasons, it had all that stuff removed, and it was stuck onto a PC graphics card and renamed the V9990E VDP3, which just rolls off the tongue. So it would have been kind of interesting if they kept those backward modes in there. I wonder if they'd been able to do some kind of emulation layer if they'd had that on PCs. Possibly wouldn't have been that useful, but an interesting idea all the same. The MSX line was effectively over, outside of a few more industrial units and some clones as well, especially in Korea. But it was a range that had lasted 10 years. It had been phenomenally successful in Japan and at least somewhat successful outside of it, especially in Europe. It had spawned multiple IPs, including Metal Gear Solid, and resulted in an unbelievable array of computers, ranging from the dull workman-like machines to really incredibly eye-catching designs, especially some of the ones from Sony, like an old red one I used to use, which somebody purchased off me, but it was a beautiful machine. As a collector of retro computers, the MSX on its own offers such a huge spectrum of machines to buy that you could effectively just concentrate on those and still have a very happy and long collecting life. In fact, if you just concentrated on the MSX1, you would probably have a very long and active collecting life just getting those machines. And if you add that, the increasing rarity of the MSX2, the MSX2 Plus, and the TurboR machines, you've got all of the challenge of collecting those things as well. Yeah, TurboR machines especially, I've been after one for years. I finally got one recently. But they're just, they were just, it's an ever decreasing slope of success. And so as you get down the other end, there are less of those machines out there because less were shipped, less were made. So the MSX2 Plus and TurboR machines are hard machines to get. As I said at the beginning, still haven't got a 2 Plus machine yet. I still am trying to get one, but they're going for slightly crazy price at the moment. Although I did just recently miss out on one by 10 quid. It went for £65, which was quite annoying. Although obviously whoever bid for that, they may have had hundreds of pounds on it at the end, but still annoying that it went as cheap as that and I didn't get it. Anyway, that's enough of me babbling. I do genuinely love the MSX retro computers, as I think I've probably shown. And it is genuinely a machine that I think almost anyone can start collecting. I mean, they're not cheap in a lot of parts of the world. The cheapest ones you can get are certainly from Japan. Then you have to factor in all of the transport costs and all that. But you can still get fairly cheap ones for... I've recently picked up a machine, a Canon V10 for 20 quid. With the delivery and stuff, which is hard to say because it came with a bunch of other things. But with delivery, it probably went up to 50, 60 quid. But it still was an effectively cheap machine. It's broken and I've got to fix it, but that's retro computer collecting for you. That happens all the time. But you can get machines in Europe. You can, if you're very, very lucky, get machines in America. They did come out. And almost all over the world you can find them. So, yeah, no, there are a range of machines that have got such a massive history. They had such a cultural impact in their home country in Japan. And at least some impact, like the Netherlands, especially in Europe. They were very popular machines there. So yeah, it's a fantastic piece of retro history and machines that I genuinely feel everyone should at least experience slightly, even if it's just in emulation. Because once you get outside of the hacky cheap ports that were made, especially in the UK and Spain, where they would just take the Spectrum code and just kind of slam it on and without any care and attention. Once you get to the machines that were based, the games that were based on cartridge and made in Japan, where actual care and attention was used, and they used the abilities of the actual hardware, then there are some fantastic titles out there and well worth taking a look at. I don't think I'd bother with the there's weird like almost MSX minis that have been made by a company, but they're very expensive for what they are. I imagine just playing them on the Mister cores would be just as good, and they work out cheaper than buying this kind of single-use device. So you may as well just go for one of those, if anything else. Thanks for watching and getting through this very fact-heavy video. If you like the video, please hit like. If you really like the video, please hit subscribe. If you didn't like the video or you have something else to say, then please leave it in the comments below. Also share, don't forget to share, please. It really helps out the channel. If you want to, you can join our Patreon or our channel membership, and you'll get access to videos early and also a load of exclusive ones as well. And or the bell icon, the bell icon somewhere down here, which will tell you when we release a new video, because just being subscribed is not enough apparently. Yeah, see you next time. The 2 Plus had a few changes over its predecessor, most notably the inclusion of Yamaha's V9958 video display chip. Whilst not the giant leap the standard was designing for the future, it still added some much requested features, including hardware scrolling, more resolutions and more colours, up to 16 from a palette of 256. Other than that, it solidified 128K of VRAM as a standard, helpful for all those new modes. There aren't any games that are written specifically for the 2 Plus, but several MSX2 games will use some of those extra features, notably the hardware scrolling, if detected. In total, 8 machines were officially released, all of them by Sony, Panasonic or Sanyo. However, there were also some conversion kits to upgrade MSX2 and even some MSX1 machines, and these made it as far as Brazil. This machine is our Sanyo Wavy PHC35J, just trips off the tongue. It was released in 1989 and has 64K of memory. It does not have inbuilt disk drives. The new specification still hadn't made that a mandatory requirement, or indeed 128K of main memory a mandatory requirement. Right, so that's a little bit of history behind basically why this machine exists. We also got the our lovely Wavy 23, the kind of the predecessors of this machine, which is an MSX2 machine. So if we can get the games running on both machines, we can kind of show what the difference is between the MSX and the MSX2 version. Right, but this machine, as you can see, it's a lovely, lovely curvy shape. This is a little bit, it's got some weird, it picks up fingerprint stains and stuff really easily. It needs a bit of cleaning. I haven't even taken this one apart. It kind of just worked. I normally test stuff inside, but because this is already shown as running on the auction, I decided just to try it out, and it seems to work. I think I'm getting some noise, so there are some caps that are going to need replacing at some point, I suspect. But at the moment, it does work. It's got this register controller, which is actually kind of like a turbo fire, a built-in turbo fire there. The pause button, well, pauses. These lights all control different things. So this light obviously is this. It blinks depending on how fast this is set. That's the pause, shows you it's enabled. That's if the like keyboard graphics thing is set for different characters. The caps, well, obviously it's the caps, but it also flashes if there is like disk access and stuff. And of course the power button, which is a power light, Yep, 2 cartridge slot. This one taken up by our MSX Mapper cartridge. Nothing on that side. Let's go straight to the back. And starting over this side, we can see there's a printer port. This is an RGB, which is kind of it's a standard, as close to a standard connector as you get on the MSXs. Channel controller for RF. We use that, fortunately. Composite video and audio out. The built-in power lead, and a nice big rocker switch for the on-off. And on this side, we have 2 joystick ports, a reset button, always a welcome addition, and the cassette port, it not having been removed from the standard, even though it was eventually removed from the TurboR. There we go. I think it's a lovely looking machine. It's nice and curvy. Certainly I prefer it to the Wavy 23 design, although that one is growing on me, I will admit. There's not much more to say. I guess we just we'll just try it out. Oh, I guess the keyboard. The keyboard is all right. It's got some good travel, a good bounce on it. It's not a bad keyboard at all, and it works, which is obviously a bonus. The joysticks, obviously MSX compatible ones. I've now found my MSX1. If you follow my social media, you'll know that after making the joysticks video and taking the complete mickey out of this terrible, terrible joystick, I was forced to use it because I couldn't find any other MSX joysticks. And it is as bad as I'd made it out to be, by the way. I was very right on that. But that's fine. We have now found our MSX joystick, so we can continue using that. Right, so what I suggest we do is we turn off the cameras and turn on the recording devices and just play some games and see if we can see what the difference is between the MSX and the MSX2 Plus versions. So there we have it. That was the MSX2 Plus, at least R1, our Sanyo. I guess not a huge number of changes to the previous version, but you can kind of get a grasp of what has improved, and they were sensible improvements. Maybe not quite enough for a whole new generation, which the sales kind of proved, but definitely enough to make it a much better machine. So, there were some graphical issues as well you'd have seen with the with the games, and I recorded all these on the new machine first, on the MSX2 Plus machine, and all those graphical things popped up, and I was genuinely concerned that had a repair job coming up. I mean, I still kind of do, but a more urgent one. But then I ran them on the Wavy 23, the MSX2 machine, and had exactly the same issue. So it's probably the cartridge rather than the actual machines. I really do need to find a much better way of loading games up on these machines. That cartridge is not perfect.
The present is horrible. The future looks bleak. Remember our childhood to get us